drive-thru.
Hey everybody, what's going on? And it's time for Story Hour, and that's what we do here on the DP Show. And we've got a great storyteller in the studio. Brett Bodine joins us, and Brett, journeyman of the sport. I mean, you've done it all. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'd say, I when I'm at a racetrack, I think there's not a pair of shoes involved in a racing event that I haven't walked in at one point or another in my life and my career. And I've raced in every series NASCAR has. So, that's pretty cool.
I was going to introduce you as the announcer of Chemung Speedrome. I was wondering if that...
That was a short-lived career, trust me. When your dad owns the racetrack, you're the guy on deck for any position needed. I did it all at the racetrack. I painted the lines on the track, painted the walls, painted the bleachers, flipped hamburgers, popped popcorn. I announced, as you said, I scored races, flagged races. You got to be able to do it all.
What were when you did work for your family's track? What were the duties that you liked doing, and which duties sucked?
I enjoyed working with my dad mostly because he taught me how to do things, from being a carpenter to an electrician to a plumber. When you own a racetrack, you got to be able to do it all those kind of things, and it really taught me, don't be afraid of a project, to take on a project and you just figure it out. Just work your way through it. And that's what I try to do today with my kids is don't worry about it. You can figure it out. Of course, with today's world, everything's on YouTube, just like your show. And you can learn anything you want to learn about how to do anything. So, it was great just working with my dad.
YouTube's amazing, isn't it?
It really is. It really
you
is.
could find squirrels eating Cheez Whiz on YouTube.
I've rebuilt 302 Ford engines for a 77 pickup that I own. I'm trying to do the same thing for my daughters. She's got a 2004 Ford Explorer, and I've got to replace the engine. So it's no problem. You just learn how to do it via YouTube.
And you can also tell the kids, come here, let me show you how cool your dad was. Look what he did back in the day, and pull up one of your old races, right?
So that they do that, and that's kind of fun. We do once in a while. We'll watch an old race on the big TV off the computer, and it's fun.
One of the things that I try to explain to these kids is that they see this person as dad, but the other people around them, they don't really realize the badass race car driver that they have as a father, and it's the same thing with a lot of them. I mean,
it's the same way in my household. All three of my kids from racing over at Millbridge, and Alex is really the one that I'll show him some stuff, and he just can't believe that Dad did that.
Well, you know what? It's so funny too, because before we were going to have you on the show, just looking back at all of the famous names that you have been associated with in your career. I mean, just not even on the car owner side, just the crew chief side. I mean, Harry Hyde, Jake Elder. I mean, who else? Haas Ellington.
Haas Ellington. I mean, I'm very blessed. I came through the modified division racing against the greats, Bugsy Stevens, George Summers, Leo Cleary, and all of those kind of guys, and Richy Evans and Jerry Cook and George Kent, and the list goes on and on. Got into what is now Xfinity, the Busch Series, Tommy Houston, Tommy Ellis, Rick Mast, greats of that series. And then into the Cup Series, I got to race against Cale Yarborough and Richard Petty and Bobby Ellison and Donnie Ellison, and just
when giants walk the earth.
Exactly, and I just was so blessed to come through our sport during that time.
There's probably a lot of modified fans that are listening right now going, come on, get to the modified stuff. But there's just so much that we could encompass here. I mean, first off, of course, you came from that modified world, and the Bodine name is synonymous in modified racing. Your brother had incredible success. You had just such an incredible time in the Sherry Cup car and all that, but your modified career was very much flash on the scene too, wasn't it?
It really was. I didn't spend that many years there. I was, as I said, raced at my dad's track in the street division, got into the modifieds in New York State, Central New York, Shangri-La Speedway, Spencer Speedway, Oswego, and raced a little bit in New Jersey, at New Egypt. and moved immediately to New England to try to race against the best. That was my whole goal, race against the best, and was so fortunate to get as you said, the Sherry Cup ride.
But in that upstate New York area, though, you still had giants up there too. I mean, Richy was from Rome, Jerry Cook. Who else were some of the big guys you had to deal with?
Well, Roger Treichler and Merv Treichler from Western New York out there at Lancaster Speedway. And you had the Swain boys and George Kent and just the list went on Sonny Seaman and just it was huge turnout of modifieds whenever you went to a big event, and it was very competitive. But I knew if I was going to make a name for myself, I had to do it in New England. That's where all the top teams were: the Stafford Speedway, Thompson Speedway, Riverside Park. It just was going to be where I needed to make my name. Was
that the goal at that time? I mean, were you thinking cup racing, or was it I want to be able to run a modified with these guys?
No, I was thinking cup racing. That
Okay.
When I graduated from college in '79, I gave myself 5 years to try to make it as a race car driver. If I couldn't prove to myself that I was able or had enough talent to make it, then I was just going to go back to school and continue on with engineering.
And that's what I was going to say. You are an engineer for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, associate degree engineer. Small degree, but it got me started. It gave me a foothold in the education side in case I didn't make it as a race car driver. Fortunately, I haven't had a real job since, so I've been in the sport my entire life in some form or another, and that's all I've ever done. But so I gave myself those 5 years, and I knew that what my ultimate goal was to make it to the top level of motorsports. And as I said, that was always my goal. I didn't need to stay in the modifieds like Jeff did. Jeff stayed, set all those unbelievable records. 85 wins in one season, and just crazy numbers, right? And just track champions that just dominated. I didn't feel I needed to do that. I just needed to continue to hone my craft, to keep working to be a better race car driver. And I love the modifieds, but they can teach you a lot of bad tricks when it comes to racing big, heavy stock cars. So
like what?
They stop, they accelerate, they turn, they do all the right things that race cars should do. Winston Cup cars or Grand National cars, they didn't do any of that.
Heavy.
And they're heavy. They don't slow down. They don't turn. They don't accelerate. I mean, they're so hard to drive, and that's what makes NASCAR Top Series Cup racing so difficult for all drivers from around the world. And we've seen it. We've seen some of the world's greatest drivers can't drive these cars because they don't drive as well as what they're used to.
And nowadays, that's huge to be able to have that ability to be able to do that. But when you were coming up to the ranks, ability was the big thing. It's not like bring money to the deal. You had to have driving ability.
I never took a sponsor to a race team, except for my own one, my cup team. But I never got hired because I had a check to bring along with it. And that, again, I was in the sport at the right time. That's when race teams found sponsors, and then they went out and found the best driver they could get.
You think we need to get back to that?
Well, it's kind of like once you learn how to go fast, can't unlearn speed. You can't unlearn this business aspect. I think it's part of the business now.
Getting back to the early years, the modified stuff, if you really think about it, for in the grand scheme of things, you went from grassroots racing to the top level in about 7 years, right? Because, like you said, you weren't in the modifieds long. You weren't in the Busch Series long.
No.
How did all of that happen? What was the timeline?
Again, I was blessed that I was in good race cars that I could display my talents, and I won important races. Timing is everything. Well, timing was everything in my career. From my first shot in a modified, second race in a modified at Martinsville, big race, finished 9th. Second time I ever drove one, and it was a car that I hand built.
Wow.
Me and Wayne Miller. And then to what happened to how I got into the Busch Series was a race gets rained out. Brother Jeff can't go back to Martinsville to run the Busch car. He convinces Mr. Rick Hendrick, and Robert G. To let me drive the car and go up there and win the race.
Robert G., another big name too. Yeah.
Go there and win the race. I mean, just very fortunate, but you still had to produce.
And that was your first time in a Grand National car ever?
No, that was my second time.
Okay.
But first time in that car, obviously. But so the second time you run in what back then was the Busch Series against all the greats, as we mentioned, and beat them. I mean, come on. A guy from New York State's not supposed to be able to do that. It just isn't going to happen.
So at this point, when you won that race, you were like, this is it. I've made it.
Well, no, because I knew the sport, and one isn't going to get you there, but it certainly opened a lot of eyes, and I knew it did, and it opened Rick Hendrick's eyes because he later made a deal with Levi Garrett, who was the sponsor of that car, to run me in 12 more races that year. That's really what got me in the limelight of the Busch Grand National owners, and that's what got me into that beautiful car right behind me, the Thomas Brothers car, by running 12 races for Rick Hendrick, in competing against the Cup guys when the Cup guys were in the races, like at Darlington, at Charlotte, Dover, Rockingham, being the only guy or one of the only guys that could run against the Cup guys. That's what got me my shot.
So you got to tell me the story when we talked the other night about the working in the shop, getting the call for the ride, and then you got a call from Mr. Hendrick after you won. You got to take us through that whole story.
Yeah, so I was working. I had just had a very successful season in New England in the Sherry Cup car, the 12, and I knew I needed to live in the South. If I was going to make it in this sport, I needed to live in the South. So I applied for a job at Hendrick Motorsports, and Harry Hyde was the crew chief. He hired me as a fabricator. I worked all winters through the 84 to 85 springtime.
Learning under Harry Hyde.
Working for Harry Hyde in the fab shop, building race cars for Brother Jeff, who was driving the Cup car that time, the Levi Garrett car, and, making a living. But I didn't have any solid plans to race down here. Billy Carrazzo and Clyde McLeod of the Sherry Cup team, we made a deal to stay together for just the big modified races, but there was no way I could run a weekly show living in North Carolina. So, so race got rained out at Martinsville. The Busch race got rained out, and went back up there as a substitute driver. The kid out of the fab shop goes to Martinsville and wins the race, So that was huge. And then, back then you had to stay wait in the payoff line. They paid you that day.
You got cash.
You got
right?
Yeah, you got money.
Okay.
And so I had to wait in the line to get paid. And Monday morning I told Mr. Hyde, Harry Hyde, that I had to take the money down to Mr. Hendrick. Went down to City Chevrolet where his office was at that time, and walked in there and gave him the check, and he says, well, what are we going to do with this? Because we didn't discuss the purse or paying me or anything. It was just a last minute,
you're happy to have the
just
opportunity.
go up there and race,
Yeah.
And he said, well, I'm going to treat you just like your brother Jeff and Tim. And I said, look, you don't owe me a dime. I mean, it was an honor to drive that car, and thank you for the opportunity. And no, I'm going to pay you just like Jeff and Tim, and you're going to get 50%. Well, I walked out there. I knew I was rich, man.
$6,000 in your pocket?
$6,000 in my pocket. Oh my goodness,
yeah,
that was great.
This racing thing's not bad,
it's
right?
It's not a bad gig, So, and then as I said, later that day, Mr. Hendrick came to the shop. It was close. We were wrapping things up for the day, and he informed me that I was going to go to work full time over at the Busch shop, and that Levi Garrett agreed to sponsor me for 12 more races, and that was a dream come true.
And it was 12 races, technically in today's view, a limited schedule, and you still made it work. You won what, like 4 or 5 races?
We won,
year, right?
Yeah, we won 3, had 8 poles. I mean, we only finished out of the top 10 once because the car broke, but that was, we were a lap ahead at IRP, had a lap on the field and the engine broke, but a lap on Darrell Waltrip, who was running second.
Now, were these other guys bitching, going, oh, he's only getting this ride because he's Jeff's brother?
Oh, yeah, of course. And I'd have to be a fool not to think that people were going to say that all the time. They were always going to compare me to Jeff. You know, I was nowhere near the modified driver Jeff Bodine was. I was nowhere near the Busch Grand National driver Jeff Bodine was, and I was nowhere near the Cup driver Jeff Bodine was. But I was Brett Bodine, and that was my career, and my record and my stats speak for themselves.
So the opportunities that come along to you happen kind of quickly in your career. Compared then to now, a lot of guys did it on their ability. What is the big difference now? I mean, obviously the money is huge now, but what is the big difference now to then?
Well, you know, Derek, back then, I moved along kind of pretty fast. I didn't stay in one spot very long in one series. You know, a couple years in the modifieds, a couple years in the Busch, and bam, I was in the Cup Series. And there wasn't near the scrutiny on drivers because people respected you for what you had already done. You know, you couldn't get in a car just because you had a pocket full of money. You got in a car because owners wanted the best driver they could get. Today, at NASCAR, I chair the committee that we have a resume system, and we review the driver's abilities, and we tell them, okay, you got to be in the ARCA series, or you got to be in the trucks, or you win some races or run well, and then we can move you up. We really watch over that because of the fact that it was getting out of hand where people could just show up with money and get in a race car, not having the talent or the qualities. We wanted to make sure people, not only the driver that we were trying to approve had the talent and ability, but also protect the drivers that were currently racing on the racetrack.
What are some of those things that you're looking for while the committee is trying to evaluate those drivers?
We review everything they've done, and as I tell drivers and I tell parents, because these days we work with some pretty young drivers who are very, very talented, we tell them the things that matter the most are the kind of car you drive, the size racetrack you drive it on, and the quality of the field. So a four-cylinder on a quarter mile against 4 cars, that doesn't mean much to me. Super late model on a half mile against 24 cars, now that means something. So, and that's the way we look at it to get drivers started. Then as they become in our series, we want them to perform and perform at a good level, be good citizens out there on the racetrack, you know, and do the things. Then we will move them along, you know, from the truck series to Xfinity and then in the Cup.
So are you, besides the racing stuff, are you guys like watching their social media and what they're posting? Or?
Yeah, there's people that do that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, but they're part of the committee.
Okay.
I'm really the guy that's looking at on track.
Brett, the story of that win at Martinsville is great and really rare nowadays, where drivers win in their first or second shots.
Well, how it happened, you know, as we talked about earlier, was extremely rare. You know, again, just a guy working out of the fab shop and gets a call to go drive a substitute for the main driver and wins the race. I mean, that's unusual. But what happened after the race, I was floored. You know, I was driving for Robert G., Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s grandfather, and Robert was known for having the most beautiful Busch cars. All the cars he ever raced, built for other drivers, were beautiful, and he had some great drivers drive for him. He had Darrell Waltrip and Tim Richmond and Bobby Ellis and Dick Trickle, and locally, you know, Brother Jeff, and then locally Hayward Plyer, and the local heroes around the Charlotte, North Carolina area.
Those were those orange and white 17s, right?
That's right. That's
okay.
what Darrell drove, yep. And so here I am. I pull into Victory Lane at Martinsville, and Robert comes over, puts the window net down. He doesn't say, great job, you know, fantastic race, nothing. In his Richmond, Virginia Southern accent says, I get the effing clock. He didn't care about the money. He wanted the clock. And as I learned later, Robert was always about the hardware.
Oh, okay.
The deal you were supposed to have with him is he gets all the trophies.
Really?
Oh, yeah, that was the deal. I didn't know it. You know, again, I barely knew Robert, right?
That's kind of rare because you hear a lot of drivers giving away their old trophies. You don't hear the guys collecting them.
He said, I get the effing clock. And I'm like, okay, you know.
Did he preface the sentence with "boy"?
Yes.
He did.
Yes. And so then, so Mr. Hendrick was ecstatic that we won because that was the first race that Levi Garrett had won.
Okay.
And that was big for sponsorship.
And that's before Jeff won Daytona, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So then Mr. Hendrick, he buys me a duplicate clock for my trophy,
That's
so that
cool.
was really cool. But Robert we'd be at the shop, and Robert say, I took Darrell Waltrip and Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Bodine, and Dick Trickle to Martinsville, but who's got to win me a clock? That damn Brett Bodine.
Hey, he got it, right?
He got his clock.
He got his clock. You got your win, which was essentially, for all intents and purposes, your audition really in racing, which was something you nailed.
Well, in big time stock car racing, won a bunch of races up north and all that in the modifieds, but that wasn't going to get me a cup ride. I knew what I had to do, and I had to do it in that Busch series.
Do you miss the modifieds at all?
Oh my gosh, yes.
They are such cool cars.
I miss the cars, I miss the schedule, I miss the racetracks, but most of all, I miss the people. I mean, some of my dearest friends were made racing modifieds, competing against them. I miss my buddy George Summers and
living legend,
and Leo Cleary. Ronnie Bouchard. We'd play golf down at Daytona during speed weeks. So the four of us would go out and play golf, and they're all gone now.
What was your relationship like with some of those guys, like Richy Evans or the Bouchards or the Flemke family? Because they are gods in their respective racing.
They were. I mean, they dominated racing, and that's why I went to New England, because I wanted to compete against the best, and they were the best. And my first couple years with racing with Richy was at Shangri-La Speedway in Owego, New York, and I raced every Wednesday night at New Egypt, and we ran a race at New Egypt one night. We were down there racing, and it was a tough field of cars down there. I mean, all the guys from Long Island, the top shoes, Freddie Harbach and Charlie and Greg Sachs
and Dan Giovanelli,
and and then all the New Jersey guys, Jamie and Gil Hearn and that group all out of
Ray Evernham
out of Wall Stadium, and then Richie and Jerry would be there, and the top guys, George Kent and some other guys would go down. I mean, it was like an all-star race on a Wednesday night every week at New Egypt. So this one week down there, this is my first year in modifieds. I'm a raw rookie, right? I came out of the street division, went right into modifieds, and we got a heat race. And I had a great relationship with Richie because he was kind of my go-to guy if I needed some pointers or help with my car setup, whatever. Jeff was running down south, and he wasn't around for me to pick his brain at the racetrack. So one night we're luck of the draw, I started outside pole in the heat race, and you had to finish in the top three to get into main.
And this was back when they ran heat races to get into the show.
Darn right.
Right.
So, and I'm thinking, okay, well, Richie's just going to blow me away here at the start, right? The old New Egypt was a quarter mile tight. I mean,
I've been there.
And I had a 472 cubic inch big block in my car, and I don't think I ever got it wide open at this racetrack. That's how much I was so overpowered for the racetrack. It was so hard to hook up. So anyways, we start the heat race, and I mean, we go in the first turn, and I'm outside of him. I'm still there. I mean, we run the entire heat race side by side, right? He comes over after the race. He said, "Did you learn anything?" I said, "Yeah, I learned how to run the outside." He said, "That's why I stayed on the inside. I wanted you to learn the outside at this racetrack."
So he could have walked away from me at any time.
Exactly. But
really,
he let me hang out there to teach me how to run the outside at New Egypt.
Wow, that's cool.
That's really cool.
And here's the surprising part too, because I'm actually surprised that you had the rapport you did with Richie, because legend was that Jeff and Richie, they had their rivalry. I mean, their rivalry went between mutual respect and utter dislike at times.
Well, that rivalry really came after this point in time. This was 1979.
Okay.
In racing around New York, in when Jeff had his own cars, they weren't really that big of rivals. They weren't that what they grew into. You got to remember the big wrecking and all that stuff that came in the early to mid '80s.
In the Armstrong car, or
the Armstrong car,
the White
and
Tornado?
both cars, both. But,
oh, really?
But see, this was well before that, and actually, Jeff and Richy, I'm not going to say they were friends, but they shared a Firestone tire deal. So during the wintertime, Firestone would always take Jeff and Richy and the teams somewhere down here in the south to go do tire testing for the next season. So we spent a lot of time together doing that, tire testing for Firestone. And that's when I got to know Richy when I was about 12. I was working on Jeff's cars, and I was always around for those tire tests.
What was Richy like as a person?
Well, he loved life. There's no question. He lived every minute of it. But man, I'll tell you, people don't realize what a great car builder he was.
Yeah.
And I got a chance to experience that. In 1986, I got to drive for Art Berry. He purchased the car from Richie's widow, Lynn, and I drove it at Martinsville. Art asked me to drive, and I went out for the first practice, and I came in, and he leaned on the Nerf bar and said, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "Now I know why he beat us every week."
Oh, really?
That car was phenomenal.
Really?
Absolutely the best modified I ever drove in my life.
Now, was this when Art was building cars also?
No.
Okay.
Art was buying cars.
Okay.
And he had an opportunity to buy that car from Lynn. Richy never drove it. It was a car that was built, and he planned to run it that season, but Art bought it and, of course, put Art's touch of magnificence on it with the paint job and how beautiful it was. It was perfect, but unbelievable race car.
What over the years? What was your favorite modified to drive of all of them?
It would be the 12. The Sherry Cup car. We were a great race team. We were so closely knit. Everybody always was pulling in the right direction. We never had any issues. Of a race team. They hired me to work full-time on the car during the race season. In the off-season, I worked in the Cup factory as an employee, but we built those cars. We had just great people.
So how did you work on a Cup car and then also work on the modified? Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
No, the Sherry
something.
Cup car.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking the Cup car. Okay.
Yeah, the Cup right. Car. Yeah.
Okay.
The Sherry Cup car.
Sorry, lines got crossed there.
Yeah,
That's
okay. That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a beautiful race car. Our owner Billy Carrazzo, he wanted everything perfect. Everything was chrome on that car. We had a chrome fuel cell can. We had chrome firewalls, Nerf bars, headers, wheels, and just he wanted a beautiful race car. But it was fast. We won some races.
It was one of the most visible cars out there because if I remember too, I was really young at the time. But you were one of the first guys to actually use neon colors in a race car.
That was Billy's trademark. He had a couple cars before I was there. Ronnie Rocco drove, and Ron Bouchard and Kenny Bouchard drove. They had a little bit of that neon or day glow paint, and he was a fanatic for really wanted to stand out. I'll tell you when they looked the best, though, was when they were sitting in Victory Lane.
Yeah, they always do. Over the years, though, of all the cars that you've driven, what was the one that you liked the most? Or was it the Cup car? Was it the Grand National car? Was it the Sportsman car from the early 80s? Which did you have the most fun in?
The most fun, I would say, was in Art Berry's car because,
really?
I only got to run it 3 times. We won twice and finished. I think we finished 3rd. I ran it at the 3 Martinsville races, and that car was just so much fun to drive. And Art is such a gentleman. He, another legend in the modified world is Art Berry, and known for how beautiful his cars were, but they also how fast they were.
And the guys that he had driving for him over the years.
Bobby Santos,
Stefanik,
George Summers won, a gazillion races driving for Art Berry. Won his last race ever in a modified at Thompson driving for Art Berry.
Wow. Now, at what point did the Cup deals or the Cup offers start to come along?
So when I was driving for the Ham car, the 00 car, I got a huge break. Mr. Hendrick convinced Superflow Exxon into sponsoring me at the World 600 at Charlotte. I was driving the 00 car and basically said, look, I got a couple cars. We'll get you a motor. Exxon really wants to have their own car at the race, so I suggested they put you in the car. So it was a task, because we basically took a Folger show car and made a race car out of it. And
that was from the pictures that you showed me, right? It was the red Monte Carlo.
It was the same color as Folgers, if you think about it.
It was, yeah.
And it was one of the Folger show cars, and we got an engine from Randy Dorton, and I had to work on it at Robert G's shop there in Harrisburg, and had to work on it outside.
So wait, so you had to put together your own Cup car to run your very first Cup race?
Correct. Yeah.
Wow.
So I was doing.
You never hear it. First off, can you imagine if a driver was given that task today? Right? Think about that.
There'd be a few that could pull it off,
right.
But very few. And we had to work on it outdoors, because Robert was busy with building customer cars inside, so he didn't have room inside. So we had to literally work on it outside. Put it together, went over, and that was when they had 3 days of qualifying, and they were 4 laps, just like Indianapolis. So you took your average of your 4 laps. We didn't make it the first round. And second round, we had an oil problem. I was going to make the show easily, but it started blowing oil out of the oil tank, and I darn near spun out on my last lap in my own oil. So we were down to the last day. I mean, we're not going to get a provisional, and this is when they got 60, 70 cars trying to make the race over there. And we got in on the 4th day, just tickled to death to make the Cup race at Charlotte. And had the Ham car. We raced it on Saturday, and then they pitted the car on Sunday for us. And we ended up, I think it was 18th or something like that. Won Rookie of the Race, beat Alan Kowicki and Davey Allison out for Rookie of the Race.
Really?
Got a bonus for that. And, so there I was. I made it to the top stage, got my first Cup ride. It was fantastic.
What, did you get out of the car afterwards thinking, I made it?
I was exhausted. Are you kidding me? I think I sat right down 600 miles in the middle of the day. Remember back then they weren't.
That's right.
They weren't at night.
That's right.
And I ran 300 the day before. I was one tired puppy.
And there was no such thing as a cool box or anything like that.
No. I mean, and it was hot. It was hot. Yeah.
I can't imagine. Yeah, you did the Thomas Brothers car the first day, and then the Cup car the second day.
900 miles in 2 days, man.
I love that you call it the Ham car too.
The Ham car. That's what it is. The Ham
Actually,
car.
backing up a little bit, you got out of the car. You got in that car after Sam Ard and Jimmy Hensley, right?
Yep. Sam had his accident at Rockingham. It was a career-ending accident. Mm-hmm. Just really unfortunate. And in '85, when I was driving for Mr. Hendrick with the Levi Garrett car, Jimmy Hensley was driving the 00 car. So
Sam Ard, obviously Southeast racer.
Yep.
Jimmy Hensley, another one, from Virginia.
Yep.
And now Howard Thomas hires a Yankee. How did that go over?
Well, not really good internally, in the garage area. A lot of people didn't think I deserved it, and maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But all I know is I had won the previous year, won 3 Busch races and had 8 poles driving for Robert G. And I think I earned the 00 ride. And Mr. Thomas was, what a gentleman, just a salt of the earth, family-owned company, and he loved racing. And he loved to see that 00 car go around the racetrack.
He just gave it up after a while? He just didn't want to do it anymore?
Well, no, so when I got out of the car, Larry Pollard drove.
Okay.
For them, and then it was a couple years, and then he just got out of racing. Yeah.
Do you think it was just the evolution of it to just all the technology coming in?
Yeah, it was
the smaller teams.
Correct.
Just
got
out?
in the cost. The cost was going up, and he was self-sponsored. He took the money right out of his paycheck to run that race team, and it was just getting too expensive. Yeah, it sure was. I was at Martinsville one time running my modified, and Sam was there driving the 00, leading the race. Right? This is a great Sam Ard story. He's the best, and he's leading the race. Then all of a sudden, if you were paying attention, he came down the front straightaway, and he was holding the steering wheel out the window. what it was, Sam always ran one of those plastic old style, just a passenger car steering wheel. The ring had broke off, and he was driving it with the spoke, and to show the team that he had a steer. And that was before quick disconnects and all that stuff. He drove that thing, kept leading the race for a while, and finally they black flagged him.
Really?
Yeah, driving it with a spoke. That's the greatest Sam Art story I ever, and I got to witness it myself.
Holy cow. You saw his arm out the window with the steering wheel.
He got the steering wheel ring hanging out the window, and he's driving the car hanging on the
with
spoke.
Handlebars.
Yeah,
essentially.
That's right, with the handlebar.
I never got to see him race in my life, but I heard he was incredible.
Oh, just phenomenal. Just
really?
What a short track racer. And, of course, he had a lot of success on the big tracks, too.
What kind of pressure were you under hopping in that car? Because Sam got out of it. He won races and championships in it, set a record for Busch Series wins in a year. Yep. And now you hop in. I mean, what kind of pressure?
And he's a Hall of Famer, but also, that's how great his career was. There was pressure. Yeah, there's no question there was pressure, but I was working with a dear friend of mine, Jerry Kennan, and Jerry was the crew chief for Sam for all those big wins and those great years, and he was there when Jimmy Hensley was there, but he was the crew chief. He was in charge of the car, and we had been friends for years. Through Jay Hedgecock, local racer over there in Caraway, and I got to know Jay and Jerry, and Jerry really is the one that convinced Mr. Thomas to give me the shot, Okay. I didn't feel the pressure because we both were so driven to compete and to run well. We didn't have time for it. There was only two of us. That was the full time that worked on the car. We had two of us, Jerry and myself, and we had 3 race cars and ran the entire Busch schedule.
Wow. That must have been just 12-hour days, Monday through Friday.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that was the shop was over in Asheboro, and I was living in Harrisburg. So it was an hour drive each way. And we raced Daytona to Oxford, Maine, and actually that's where that picture behind me is. That's in the pit area at Oxford. The Oxford 250.
That's when the Oxford 250 was an actual Busch race, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And so there's a great story about this too. So Jerry had never been to Oxford, and I had been there with the modifieds. I had previously won a 100-lap race at Oxford Speedway, beat Richy Evans and Brian Ross that day. So I had experience racing at Oxford. So Jerry and I had an electrical box truck with an open trailer, and him and I drove it from Asheboro, North Carolina to Oxford, Maine. Made a stopover at Stafford and ran a modified that night. But we're pulling in the pits at Oxford
to make some extra cash.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You got to do it in volume. If you're not getting it in quantity, you got to do it in you're not getting it in quality. You got to do it in quantity. You got to race a lot. So that's what I did. So we pulled in, and there's cars there. And you'll remember some of these names, Buzzy Bezanson and and Dick McCabe and the heroes of the Maine racing area, northern New England, Wayne Dion, and just all those. Well, we went by Buzzy's car, and he had this little Chevy 2 body, and had the rebar welded on the wheels and square tubing over the valve stems and Nerf bars down the side. And Jerry says to me, well, how many classes are racing here today? I said, 1. He said, we got to race against that with our taxi cab? I said, we sure do. I mean, the rules back then, they did it different. They did it different. They just tried to combine and let everybody race, but that was quite a show, boy, back then. We had the luck of the draw for heat races and, crazy.
How did you do in the Oxford 250?
I was leading with 25 laps to go and got a left front flat. And Oxford is a big circle. Yeah. And I was running pretty good with that thing when it was low in air, but when it started sparking the wheel, right. I had to pit. We ended up pitted under green, ended up 2 laps down, still finishing the top 10.
I was going to say pit stops had to be hard because it was just you and Jerry, right?
Well, we had a couple guys that would come in work regular jobs, and they would come in and help pit the car.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
did you ever get any of your modified buddies to come up and help you out?
yeah, actually that day they were there to help us out too. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, now let's skip forward a few more years. You're out of the Busch car or the Grand National car. You got your one ride in Cup with Rick Hendrick. How did you get how did the next Cup deal get?
So the next Cup deal was pretty special too. It was Junior Johnson.
Wow.
In 1980,
Another big name.
1987, Terry Labonte got hurt at Darlington driving the Budweiser Monte Carlo. Broke his scapula in his shoulder. The next two races on the schedule were Bristol and North Wilkesboro, 2 short tracks. And Junior Johnson called me up and said, "Hey, would you be willing to substitute drive for Terry?"
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, wow. Right?
You know, here's the funny part too is like these things don't happen at all. You don't, it isn't common where you get the phone call saying, "I need you to come drive my car this weekend."
That's right.
It's not heard of anymore.
And again, so proud, very fortunate. Timing is everything, right? And that I was driving the 00 car. Terry gets hurt, unfortunately for him, but it was a break for me because I was performing so well in the Busch Series. He could have hired anybody. He could have hired Jack Ingram or L.D. Ottinger or Dale Jarrett or anybody. And he wanted me to do that. I mean, that was fantastic. So, cute story, another one. So I go up there to get fitted in the seat. And Terry and I are basically the same size, and it wasn't much to it. So Junior was giving me a tour of his facility. I'd never even been to his place up in Ingle Howell. And so he's showing me the race shop and all that, and he takes me up to the engine shop. And there was some crusty veterans up there, let's just say.
Grizzled
old Southern guys that had been building engines for Junior for years, right? And they really wouldn't even acknowledge I was in the room around. And
why is that?
One gentleman said, "Well, I thought I'd seen everything in racing, but the day that Junior Johnson hired a damn Yankee to drive his race car."
Oh God.
So there was that.
Right. You're an outsider.
Yep. Yeah. So, but it worked out great for me. The way the rules were written, I had to qualify the car because I was a rookie, and Terry had to attempt to start the race. So I would time trial the car, and Terry would get in it for the pace laps, and he would make one lap and come back down pit road. I'd get in the car, and I'd have to start last. So my first 2 starts, actually, those 2 races aren't my credit. They're credited to Terry Labonte. They're not on the record books for me. They're all on Terry's record because he was the driver of record.
Oh, no kidding. Well, how did you do in the race?
So he got the point. So North Wilkesboro, the first race, we finished 8th. In the second race at Bristol, we finished 9th. 2 top 10s that I don't get credit for. But again, to drive the Budweiser. And I think I sent you a picture of me in a Budweiser uniform.
Yes.
That was the uniform for that. Wow. For those 2 races.
It's so funny too because like the fans nowadays don't realize just the huge history that you've been involved with in this sport. I mean, when they see you now, I think they think, NASCAR official, pace car driver, former team owner.
Old washed up driver, has been.
Yeah, but just the history that is behind this is just incredible. We got to have you back on the show. We definitely do.
Absolutely.
Because there's so many more stories that we haven't even scratched the surface on. And that's what we love about this show is that we're going to have you guys back and telling more war stories and hopefully we can get you to come back with a guest or even maybe get your brother to come on.
Oh, that'd be great.
I'm
or
sure
get one of them anyways, right?
That would be fantastic. You and one of your brothers, either Todd or Jeff here, just talking about, war stories over the years. But thank you for coming in. We haven't even gotten to more of your Cup career. We haven't talked about Kenny Bernstein. You were the first guy to run a Hans device in NASCAR. We're going to talk about that on the next episode for sure. But I want to thank you for coming in today.
My pleasure.
Today has been awesome. Will you come back again?
Oh, for sure.
Awesome.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Brett Bodine, a great guest this afternoon on the Derek Pernesiglio Show. I want to thank him for coming in, and like always, we'll catch you the next time. Bye.